The night was clear over the North Atlantic, a cold expanse of black water beneath and a canopy of stars stretching endlessly above. High in that sky, two F-22 Raptors cut their way through the darkness, their engines humming with a subdued thunder that only the pilots inside could truly feel. They had been dispatched on a long-range patrol, part of a classified mission that had been brewing quietly for weeks. Intelligence reports suggested that an unidentified aircraft had been skirting NATO airspace, moving without a transponder, sometimes vanishing from radar only to reappear further west. It wasn't Russian, at least not by its electronic signature, and it wasn't anything NATO was familiar with. That mystery had led to a tense chain of events that now placed Captain Michael Reeves and Lieutenant Kara Dalton in their Raptors, streaking silently through the night at near supersonic speed. Reeves, the senior pilot, was calm and steady, his voice crisp over the secure channel as he ran through their checklists. "Fuel status," he asked, his tone professional but carrying a subtle edge of anticipation. Kara glanced at her readouts, her fingers moving swiftly across the console. 71%, green across the board, she replied. She was younger, just a few years into her service, but her skills were unquestionable. Her call sign, Valkyrie, had been earned during an exercise where she had managed to outmaneuver 3 simulated opponents at once. To Reeves she was reliable, sharp and, though he'd never admit it aloud, the kind of pilot who made him push himself harder. Their radar picked up something faint just at the edge of range. It wasn't squawking identification. It was moving fast, erratic at times, but always just inside the zone that made it difficult to intercept without pushing their fuel margins. Reeves frowned behind his oxygen mask. "Target bearing 067, range 200, he reported to command. The voice in his ear came back after a few seconds, the delay a reminder of how far out they were. "Copy that, Reeves. Rules of engagement remain the same. You are weapons hold unless hostile intent is confirmed." Reeves acknowledged, though he didn't like it. Weapons hold meant he couldn't fire unless he had absolute proof the other aircraft was threatening them or NATO airspace. That wasn't unusual, but in situations like this, where the unknown could be anything from a rogue drone to a foreign prototype, it left him with a gnawing unease. Kara's voice crackled over the intercom, a shade softer than usual. "Doesn't feel like a drone. Not with that flight pattern." Reeves agreed. The object seemed to move as though piloted, banking in long arcs, adjusting altitude in ways that didn't make sense for a drone's programming. Yet something about its movements was off. As they closed the distance, the object finally resolved on their sensors more clearly. To Reeves' surprise, it wasn't large. Smaller than an F-16, maybe even smaller than a trainer jet. No standard silhouette matched, and infrared showed only faint heat signatures, like an old airframe running at minimal power. Whatever it wasn't a modern fighter. Reeves called it in, but command's voice was firm. "Do not engage. Shadow it, maintain visual if possible. We need intel." Orders were orders, and so he angled his F-22 lower, Kara mirroring him as they began a careful intercept. The night sky shifted around them, the stars tilting as their Raptors rolled and dipped into a pursuit curve. It took several tense minutes, but soon the object came into visual range, a dark silhouette against the faint silver line of the horizon. Kara was the first to spot it. Visual contact. "Looks like a light prop frame? Old, maybe Cold War era. But what the hell is it doing out here?" Her words carried disbelief. It was indeed an odd sight. A small, weathered aircraft, propeller-driven, limping along at an altitude where it had no business being. Its wings looked uneven, patched in places, and one navigation light flickered inconsistently. Reeves narrowed his eyes. "That's no Russian bomber. Could be a decoy." His training screamed caution. But then Kara's voice, tight now, broke through. "Wait, look at the left wing." Reeves shifted his angle, peering hard through the canopy. At first he saw nothing unusual, just the flutter of the wing surface where patched metal caught the wind. But then he realized the flutter wasn't random. The aileron, battered and loose, was moving in short, sharp bursts. Almost like signals. Kara's breath caught audibly. Morse code. That's Morse code. She was right. The wings seemed to dip and jerk in patterns, short, long, short again. Reeves squinted, forcing his mind to catch the rhythm. He hadn't practiced Morse since training, but the basics were burned in deep. Dots and dashes, frantic, desperate. He began to translate in his head. B. The word hit him like a gut punch. Someone was inside that old wreck, someone alive, signaling with the last working part of their aircraft. Kara's voice came again, low and urgent. "She's calling for help. That's a distress code." Reeves swallowed hard. His orders said weapons hold, observe only, But what kind of enemy broadcasted help in Morse with a broken wing? The old plane wobbled again, its nose dipping as if it were fighting to stay aloft. The Morse repeated, "Help, help, help," each signal timed with the trembling wing flutter. Reeves' instincts as a soldier collided with his instincts as a human being. Whoever was up there was no enemy, they were barely hanging on. He hesitated only a moment before toggling the secure channel. "Command, be advised. The unknown is broadcasting a Morse distress signal through its wing flutter. Repeating help. Repeat, help." Static filled the line, then the calm but guarded response. "Copy, Reeves. Continue shadow. No engagement authorized." He could almost hear the analysts back at command scrambling to verify. But there was no time. The little plane dipped sharply, losing altitude fast. Kara's voice cracked with urgency. "She's going down." Reeves pushed his throttle forward, keeping pace, his mind racing. Whoever was in that cockpit was in mortal danger. And yet, his hands hovered over controls that weren't designed to save but to kill. His fighter was a machine built for war, and here he was faced with a fragile soul waving frantically for life in the dark. The first sparks of defiance stirred in him. Orders or not, something about this night was different. He had flown missions where split-second choices meant life or death, where civilians could be collateral if he pulled the trigger too quickly. But this wasn't that. This was a lone, battered plane with one voice inside, spelling the same desperate plea again and again: "Help." And in the moment he realized it, Reeves felt something shift inside him. He wasn't just a pilot executing a patrol. He was the only barrier between that plane's certain death in the freezing sea and a sliver of survival. Kara's final words before silence took the channel were filled with raw determination. "Sir, we can't just watch her fall." The small plane dipped dangerously low, its silhouette wobbling against the faint sheen of moonlight that rippled over the ocean below. Reeves felt the tension crawl through his veins as if his own jet were spiraling. He adjusted his F-22's angle to stay alongside, his eyes scanning the fragile craft for any clue as to how much longer it could hold together. "She's losing altitude fast," Kara said, her voice sharpened by the instinctive dread every pilot feels when gravity begins to win. Reeves didn't answer right away. He could hear the subtle panic beneath her tone, the same panic he was suppressing in himself. To watch an aircraft fall was like watching a comrade drown, slow, inevitable, and merciless. The problem was his Raptor was no rescue craft. It wasn't built with cables, hooks, or medical kits. It was built with missiles, cannons, and stealth. And yet, all of that power felt useless in the face of one battered little prop plane crying for help in Morse across the sky. The wing fluttered again, dots and dashes jittering in the dark. Reeves forced himself to read it: "Engine fail. Low fuel." Oh. Kara picked it up too, her voice hushed in disbelief. "She's trying to tell us everything." "That's not a decoy, sir. That's a pilot." Reeves grit his teeth, frustration biting harder than the oxygen mask pressing against his face. He knew Kara was right. This wasn't some drone with a clever program. It wasn't an unmanned test. Someone was in that cockpit, half dead or terrified, clinging to the hope that another set of eyes could see her signals. "Command needs to hear this," Reeves muttered, switching his comms. "Unknown craft broadcasting Morse distress. Engine fail, low fuel. Repeat, Morse distress confirmed." The reply was too calm, too detached. "Copy, Reeves. Maintain shadow. Await further instructions." He almost cursed aloud. Maintain shadow? The damn thing was about to drop into the sea like a stone, and they wanted him to simply watch? Kara broke the silence, her tone sharper, edged with defiance. "Sir, she's not going to make it. Orders or not, if she goes down out here, she's dead. No SAR birds can get this far fast enough. We're the only ones who can even see her." Reeves knew it. He also knew what it meant if he ignored command. Court-martial. End of career. Maybe even worse if this turned into some political disaster. But as he watched the small craft lurch again, its nose dipping precariously, his decision was already writing itself inside his chest. He remembered something his flight instructor once told him back when he was still green. At the end of the day, it's not medals or orders that haunt you. It's the faces you could have saved but didn't. That truth gnawed at him now. He had no idea whose face was in that cockpit, but if he obeyed and just watched her fall, that face would never leave him. "Valkyrie," he said suddenly, his voice steady now with resolve, "we're breaking pattern. Stay with me." Kara didn't hesitate. She'd been holding her breath for that call. "Copy, Reeves. With you." Together, the Raptors dipped lower, their sleek frames cutting a menacing but strangely protective shape alongside the battered little prop plane. Reeves toggled his lights briefly, 2 quick flashes, then a long one, an improvised attempt at signaling back. The plane wobbled, its wing trembling in acknowledgement. She understood. She saw them. There was a human being in there, alive and fighting. Reeves angled his F-22 closer, enough that he could almost make out the cockpit shape through the canopy glass. He swore he saw a hand lift weakly from inside, though it might have been the flicker of shadow. But in that moment he didn't care. He'd already chosen his path. If it meant disobeying, so be it. "Command, this is Reeves," he said firmly, his jaw clenched. "Unknown craft pilot is alive, signaling distress repeatedly. Aircraft is failing. I am initiating emergency escort. Valkyrie is with me." Silence met him long enough to make his gut twist. Finally the voice came back harder this time. "Negative, Reeves. Hold position. Do not engage further." Engage. As though offering protection to a dying stranger counted as engagement. Reeves felt a bitter heat climb in his chest. "Copy," he replied, but he killed the transmission the moment the word left his lips. Kara's voice filled the channel privately. "We're committed now, aren't we?" Reeves exhaled slowly. "Yeah, we are." The old plane coughed black smoke from its exhaust, shuddering with each minute movement. Reeves matched its altitude, trying to shield it from the crosswinds with his larger wake. Kara mirrored on the other side, the 2 Raptors forming a protective cradle around the failing bird. It was a strange sight, 2 of the most advanced stealth fighters in the world, guardians to a relic that looked like it belonged in a museum. The contrast wasn't lost on Reeves. "What kind of plane is that?" Kara asked quietly. Reeves studied its lines, its worn fuselage. "Looks like a modified Yak, maybe from the 60s. But those wings are patched with composite sheets. Whoever's flying that built it to survive, not to fight." The mystery deepened. What was a relic like that doing out here beyond normal flight paths, alone, with only desperation in its signals? The Morse flickered again. "Can't hold long." Oh. Reeves leaned in close to his HUD, heart pounding. Kara read it too, her voice breaking slightly. "She's running out of time." The ocean loomed darker below them, endless, merciless. One crash out here and she'd be gone before anyone could scramble a rescue. Reeves' thoughts raced. Could they shepherd her closer to Greenland? Could she even glide that far without power? He wasn't sure, but sitting idle wasn't an option. "Stay tight," he ordered Kara. "We're going to guide her down as far as she can go. We'll make sure she doesn't die alone up here." Kara's voice steadied, iron wrapped in conviction. "Roger that." Minutes stretched into a cruel eternity as the fragile plane staggered onward, flanked by the Raptors. Reeves kept his eyes locked on her, willing her to hold together. The wing fluttered more erratically now, Morse tumbling out like a voice breaking under tears. "Please, help, cold." His throat tightened. Somewhere inside that wreck, a woman was freezing, starving for air, clinging to the desperate rhythm of dots and dashes. He couldn't hear her voice, but he felt it all the same, as though her words were etched across the stars themselves. And for the first time that night he realized this mission had changed. It wasn't about orders or unidentified crafts or political games anymore. It was about her. Whoever she was, wherever she came from, she was now under his protection. "Hang on," he whispered, though she couldn't hear him. His gloved hand brushed the throttle forward, urging the Raptor closer, as if by sheer presence he could keep her aloft. Kara's jet glinted on the other side, her lights a faint halo in the dark. Together they flew not as hunters, not as enforcers, but as guardians escorting a soul on the edge of the abyss. And somewhere between the rhythm of Morse and the rumble of engines, Reeves made himself a silent vow. As long as his jet still flew, he would not let her fall unseen into the black ocean below. The old aircraft trembled again, dipping low enough that Reeves instinctively nudged his Raptor down to match, his heart slamming against his ribs as if he could feel the failing craft's pulse through the night air. Kara slid her jet tighter on the other side, forming a razor-straight escort as the fragile plane faltered in the wind. "She's slipping more every minute," Kara muttered, her tone both analytical and deeply human, the kind of tone that belonged to a pilot who had seen too many training accidents end in funerals. Reeves didn't reply right away. His eyes were locked on the uneven pattern of the left wing. The Morse continued, jittery and broken now. "Can't breathe. Fuel empty. Dying." Each set of dots and dashes stabbed at him like a blade. She was still alive, still conscious enough to signal, and still begging. The futility of it clawed at him. He had no winch, no extra seat, no way to physically reach her. But somehow doing nothing felt like murder. Reeves pulled in closer, his HUD filling with the wavering silhouette of the aircraft. "Come on," he whispered under his breath, the words an unconscious prayer. He reached for the comms, tempted to break silence again, but command's stone-cold response from before still echoed in his mind. He knew what they would say. Maintain shadow. Do not engage. To them she was a blip on the radar, a mystery with too many risks. To him she was a person writing her last words in the sky, and every second he delayed was another second stolen from her life. Kara's voice slid into the channel softly, almost hesitant, like she feared breaking the fragile thread of hope. "Sir, what if she's military? Or worse, what if she's bait?" Reeves considered it. The thought had crossed his mind too. A damaged aircraft could be bait, luring them into a trap. But then he looked again at the wing, watched the desperate, uneven flutter spelling messages that no decoy program could fake. Each letter carried exhaustion, each pause trembled with human imperfection. "That's no bait," he said firmly. "That's someone who doesn't want to die alone." The old plane sputtered again, a cough of black smoke trailing behind it. The ocean beneath them was closer now, dark and endless, the kind of void no one survived without help. Reeves adjusted his position slightly, placing his F-22 just forward of the little craft's nose, a subtle lead as though trying to guide her along. He toggled his lights once more, long and short flashes mimicking Morse. "Follow." The battered plane jerked in response, wobbling toward his path. She had seen him. She was trying. Kara slid back a hair, giving them more room, her voice steady now with grim clarity. "We can shepherd her, maybe stretch her glide. If she holds the airframe together, she might get closer to shipping lanes." It wasn't much of a plan, but it was the only chance. Minutes passed in cruel silence, the three aircraft limping forward together. Reeves fought to ignore the fuel numbers ticking down on his own display. Raptors weren't meant for endless escort duty at low altitude. But he couldn't break away now. Not when every tremble of that wing spelled out another fragment of life. The Morse flared again, weaker this time, cold. "Can't see." Oh. Reeves clenched his jaw. Whoever she was fading fast. Hypoxia maybe, or the cold air biting into an unpressurized cabin. His imagination filled the gaps, frost creeping over cracked gauges, fingers numb on the yoke, eyes burning from thin oxygen. He pictured her pressing the control stick with failing strength, one hand desperately moving the wing to write her SOS to the world. And somehow, through the impossible odds, she had been found. By him. "Sir," Kara said suddenly, breaking his thoughts. "She's losing altitude faster. If she keeps dropping, she won't clear the swell." Reeves looked down. The ocean's black sheen shimmered closer, waves faintly visible under the moon. He had seconds to decide. His training screamed procedure, but his instincts roared louder. He throttled forward and banked slightly, flashing another signal. "Turn." The little craft wavered, shuddered, then angled weakly toward his direction. Kara mirrored, forming a triangle escort. Reeves keyed private comms. "Stay close, Valkyrie. If she stalls out completely, we'll mark her last position. But until then we keep her up." Kara's reply carried no doubt now. "With you all the way." The ocean stretched endless and merciless beneath, yet Reeves kept searching the horizon for salvation. And then barely, a faint glow ahead. He blinked, checked his HUD, then saw it, a distant shipping vessel crawling across the water like a tiny ember in the void. Hope surged through him. "There," he breathed. "Valkyrie, do you see it?" Kara shifted her angle, her voice sharp with renewed fire. "Visual. Freighter. That's her chance." Reeves toggled his lights again, frantic now. "Hold. Follow." Oh. The little aircraft stuttered lower, but her wing responded, jerking weakly as though she understood. The minutes dragged as they herded her toward the freighter's faint lights. Every dip felt final, every wobble threatened to end it all, but somehow she clung to the air. Reeves' own fuel warning pinged in his ear, but he ignored it. Nothing mattered except closing the gap. Kara's breathing came ragged through the comms, her tension bleeding across the channel. "She's barely holding. We've got maybe 2 minutes before she's in the water." Reeves leaned into his throttle, his Raptor almost vibrating with strain. "Then we make those 2 minutes count." The Morse flickered again, faint and broken. "Thank it." Reeves' throat closed. She was still conscious. Still aware enough to send gratitude even as death clawed at her. "Stay with us," he muttered fiercely, as if sheer willpower could anchor her to the sky. Kara whispered back, almost like a prayer. "We've got you. We've got you." The freighter grew larger, lights outlining its deck against the black sea. Reeves angled lower, guiding her descent. He realized what she was trying, gliding as close as possible before ditching near the ship. Maybe the crew could launch lifeboats. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was better than vanishing into nothingness. "She's going for the ship," Kara said, awe in her tone. Reeves nodded, though his chest felt like a vice. Come on, you can make it." The old plane shuddered violently, nose dipping, smoke trailing thicker. She was going down. Reeves pulled alongside, screaming into the void of his cockpit. "Pull up. Just a little more." Kara's jet flared on the other side, her voice raw. "You're almost there." The Morse flared one last time, weak and broken. "Please?" Then the engine coughed, the prop froze, and the little craft pitched nose first toward the sea. Reeves' heart stopped. "No!" he shouted, useless against the roar of wind. The plane dropped, slicing downward in a helpless arc. But at the last possible moment, the pilot fought back, yanking the nose up, leveling just enough to skim the waves. The belly of the craft slammed into the water in a shower of spray, carving a brutal path toward the freighter. Reeves' breath caught. She had ditched, but alive. Alive at least for now. Impact. Marking position. Kara's voice rang out, her hands flying across her HUD. Reeves banked hard, circling over the scene. The freighter's lights blazed brighter now, crew scrambling on deck, pointing toward the wreck drifting in their wake. Reeves felt a flood of relief crash through him. Against every odd, against orders, against death itself, she had made it to a chance. But it wasn't over. Not yet. And deep down, he knew this night's story had only just begun. Spray exploded across the ocean surface as the battered plane skidded violently over the waves, its frame shuddering, splintering, before finally grinding to a halt in a frothy wake of white foam. From above, Reeves felt his stomach twist tighter than any combat sortie had ever managed. The little craft was floating, half-broken but still buoyant, bobbing unevenly against the swell. "She ditched, she's alive." Kara cried, relief and fear mixing in her tone. Reeves circled low, his F-22 banking in a tight arc above the wreck. He squinted, searching the cockpit for any sign of movement. Then he saw it, a faint shadow shifting, a canopy cracking open. A figure pushed against the hatch, stumbling into the freezing night air. She was real. Flesh and blood, not some automated decoy. The woman climbed onto the tilted fuselage, drenched, her body heaving with visible effort even from the distance. Reeves' chest tightened. She looked impossibly small against the black infinity of the Atlantic, a fragile speck of life defying the cold, the dark, and the death that had stalked her across the sky. He dropped his nose slightly, swooping lower, his voice fierce. "Valkyrie, keep eyes on her. We're not losing her now." Kara acknowledged instantly, already marking coordinates for the freighter steaming their way. The ship's crew had seen the impact. Their deck was a frenzy of spotlights and scrambling figures, lifeboats already being prepared. But the sea was merciless, and the current was dragging the wreck away from the ship's line. Time was short. Reeves toggled his comms again, even though he knew Command's reaction. "Command, this is Reeves. Pilot is down but alive, floating near ditch site. Freighter in range, initiating rescue support. Repeat, pilot is alive." He braced for the rebuke. Instead, after a pause, the reply came colder than ice. "Reeves, you are out of line. Break contact immediately. Do not engage further." His hand clenched on the stick. Break contact? They wanted him to leave her after everything? He forced the anger down, his voice flat and calm even as it burned. "Negative, Command. I am maintaining visual until recovery. Send court-martial papers later." Kara's laugh was short, humorless, but filled with loyalty. "With you, sir." Below, the woman raised one arm weakly, waving. It wasn't a plea this time. It was recognition. She had seen them, the two silent guardians above her, and she knew she wasn't abandoned. The freighter drew nearer, lights carving bright paths across the waves. But Reeves' eyes locked on something else, movement on the horizon. He blinked, adjusted his sensors. A blip. Then another. Aircraft closing fast. "Valkyrie," he said, voice sharp. "We've got company." She checked her scope. 2 bogies, low altitude, bearing east. Speeds high. His gut sank. Whoever that woman was, she wasn't alone in her struggle. And whoever else was coming wasn't friendly. The new contact sliced through the dark, twin silhouettes resolving into armed jets. MiG-29s, their aggressive outlines unmistakable even in starlight. Reeves cursed under his breath. Of course. The MiGs roared closer, ignoring NATO boundaries, heading straight for the ditch site. Kara's voice was taut. They're here for her. It made sense. A lone pilot flying a relic through the Atlantic, chased by Soviet-era fighters that had no business this far west. Whoever she was, she mattered. Enough for enemy jets to risk international confrontation to silence her. Reeves' orders still held him. He wasn't cleared to fire unless directly threatened. But watching those MiGs bear down on the wreck, his patience shattered. "Not today," he muttered. The woman on the wreck was still waving, unaware of the danger racing toward her. The freighter's lifeboat splashed into the sea, crew rowing hard, but the MiGs would be overhead in less than 2 minutes. Kara's voice sharpened. "Weapons free, sir?" Reeves hesitated. He could already hear the voice of command, cold and condemning. "Stand down, maintain shadow." But his gut screamed louder. If they let the MiGs reach her, she'd be obliterated before she ever touched that lifeboat. He toggled his channel privately to Kara. "They fire first, we answer. But if they so much as twitch near her, I'm breaking protocol." Kara's reply was clipped, fierce. "Understood." The MiGs closed fast, their lights slicing across the sky. One pulled higher, circling, while the other angled low, straight toward the wreck. Reeves' vision tunneled, every nerve in his body taut. He pulled his F-22 into position, dropping in front of the MiG's path like a steel wall. The two aircraft met nose to nose in the sky, only yards apart, the Atlantic a black abyss beneath them. The MiG wobbled slightly, its pilot clearly shocked by the sudden presence of America's deadliest stealth jet. Reeves' voice was ice. "Not today, friend." He rolled slightly, flashing his underbelly where his missiles gleamed faintly. A wordless threat. The MiG hesitated, its nose tilting just enough to show restraint. But the second MiG wasn't as cautious. It dove lower, lining up with the freighter. Kara cut across its path like a hawk, her voice fierce over comms. "Back off." The confrontation stretched in taut silence, each side daring the other to move. Reeves' blood roared in his ears. He didn't want a war, not here, not tonight. But he'd be damned if he let them erase the woman who had begged for help in Morse from her dying plane. Finally, the MiGs pulled wide, circling once before banking eastward, retreating into the dark. Reeves exhaled slowly, only then realizing how tight his chest had been. Kara let out a shaky laugh. "Guess they didn't want to test Raptors tonight." Reeves didn't answer. His eyes were still locked below, where the lifeboat reached the wreck at last. The freighter's crew hauled the woman aboard, pulling her limp form into the boat. Reeves' relief was immediate, but it was tempered by worry. She wasn't moving much now, her body sagging against her rescuers. The lifeboat paddled hard back toward the freighter, the woman cradled in the bottom, her face pale and indistinct beneath the spray. Reeves hovered above, circling protectively until the boat finally reached the ladder and the crew hauled her onto the deck. She was safe, at least safer than she had been moments before. But questions now burned hotter than relief. Who was she? Why had she flown that death trap across the Atlantic? And why had MiGs risked everything to stop her from reaching help? Command's voice returned, this time harsher than ever. "Reeves, Valkyrie, break contact immediately and return to base. You are in violation of direct orders. Recovery of the unknown pilot is not your concern." Reeves' lips pressed into a grim line. Not his concern? He glanced one last time at the freighter's deck, where crew members were rushing the unconscious woman below. She had survived because of him, because he and Kara had defied orders. He couldn't just turn cold now. "Understood, Command," he said flatly, but the words tasted like ash. Kara's voice was quiet, private. "They'll bury this, won't they?" Reeves knew she was right. Whoever the woman was, whatever story she carried, the higher-ups would smother it in silence if they could. But for him, silence wasn't an option anymore. Not after what he had seen. As he pulled his Raptor into formation for the long flight home, Reeves made himself a promise. He would find out who that woman was. He would learn why she had risked her life, and why enemies had chased her into the jaws of death. And no order, no command, no threat of court-martial would stop him. Because sometimes, a single wing flutter in the night was enough to rewrite the course of a soldier's life. Alana's presence had become a constant in Nathan's mind, like a pulse that refused to fade. Even when she wasn't in the same room, he felt her, an echo of her voice, a trace of her scent, the faintest brush of her thoughts. It terrified him as much as it enthralled him. He had been trained his entire life to keep emotions in check, to analyze before reacting, but with her, reason was slipping away piece by piece, replaced by something far more primal and far more dangerous. The summit had entered its final phase, and the air in the diplomatic chambers was heavier than ever. Representatives from both the Thry and the human delegation sat across from each other at a long table, words sharp as blades. A fragile piece hung in the balance, every sentence threatening to unravel into hostility. Nathan sat just behind the main envoy, tasked with observing, analyzing, and advising. His notes should have been full of political insights, but instead he found himself distracted, watching Ilana's every movement from across the chamber. She sat beside the Thry emissary, silent yet impossibly present, her golden eyes occasionally lifting to meet his. Each stolen glance struck him with the intensity of a storm. Hours passed. Proposals were exchanged, points were contested, and the future of two civilizations was debated into exhaustion. When the meeting adjourned for a recess, Nathan slipped out into the corridor, needing air, needing distance from her. But he wasn't alone for long. He felt the change in the atmosphere before he even turned. A ripple of energy, a sudden charge like static crawling along his skin. She was there. Ilana. "You avoid me," she said softly, her voice carrying an otherworldly cadence. "Yet you seek me with your eyes." Nathan stiffened, turning to face her. She stood in the dim light of the corridor, her figure radiant against the stark walls, her presence filling every empty space around him. He forced a steady breath. "I don't avoid you," he answered, though the words tasted like a lie. This isn't the place. We're here for something bigger than us." Her lips curved, not quite a smile, not quite a sneer. "And yet your thoughts betray you. The humans around you speak of treaties and borders, but your mind," she stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Your mind burns for me." The accusation, or was it a truth, landed like a spark in dry grass. He wanted to deny it, to assert his discipline, but the weight of her presence unraveled his resolve. He did want her. The need was undeniable, and it frightened him more than any war ever could. "Ilana," he began, his tone pleading, "you don't understand what this could do. If anyone sees, if anyone suspects, this connection between us, it could ruin everything. The treaty, the mission, even your people standing here." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then she reached out, fingers brushing against his wrist. The touch was light, but it sent a current of energy coursing through him, tightening every muscle. Her eyes locked onto his, glowing faintly, unblinking. "You think I fear ruin?" she murmured. "I have lived with ruin my entire life. I have watched my people stripped of dignity, our voices dismissed, our souls bound by rules we did not create. If I am to risk everything, let it be for something real." Her words pierced him in ways he couldn't shield against. She was not a diplomat, not a strategist. She was raw truth wrapped in alien grace, and it was killing him to resist. He took a step back, trying to breathe, but she followed, closing the distance again until he felt the warmth of her body close to his. "Nathan," she whispered, his name curling from her lips like a secret. "You are bound to me. You feel it, don't you? The pull that neither of us can sever. You think this is choice, but it is already written." He swallowed hard, his heartbeat hammering in his ears. She was right. Every rational thought told him to pull away, but his body betrayed him, leaning ever so slightly closer, craving the touch, the connection, the surrender. The sound of footsteps in the distance snapped him back. He stepped away from her abruptly, heart racing, eyes darting down the corridor. Voices echoed faintly, human delegates approaching. He turned back to Ilana, his expression torn. "Not here," he hissed. "Not now." For the first time she looked almost amused. "Then when?" she asked, tilting her head. "When the treaty collapses. When your leaders turn on each other. Or when it is too late and all that remains is what we denied ourselves." Her words lingered even as she stepped back into the shadows, her presence receding but never gone. Nathan stood frozen for a long moment before forcing himself to return to the chambers, his face composed but his soul in chaos. That night he couldn't sleep. The delegates were housed in separate wings of the summit complex, guarded, monitored, isolated to prevent unauthorized contact. But Nathan lay awake, his mind spinning, his body restless. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, Ilana's gaze, her voice, the way she had said his name as if it belonged to her. He rose from his bed, pacing the small quarters, his thoughts a storm. Logic screamed at him to maintain control, but desire gnawed at him relentlessly. Finally, unable to bear it, he slipped out. The halls were quiet, patrolled by the occasional guard, but he moved like a shadow. He shouldn't be doing this. If he were caught, everything would fall apart. But the pull was stronger than fear. He found her waiting. As if she had known he would come, Ilana stood by the tall windows of the Thry quarters, the silver light of the alien moon washing over her. She turned slowly as he approached, her expression unreadable, yet her eyes blazing with recognition. I told myself I wouldn't, he said, voice rough with exhaustion and desire. And yet you did, she replied, a whisper edged with triumph. He closed the distance between them, his restraint crumbling with every step. They stood face to face, breath mingling, silence thick with tension. For one fragile heartbeat, the world outside ceased to exist. No humans, no Thry, no summit. Only them. Then, with a desperation that had been building since the first moment they met, Nathan reached for her. His hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing the alien softness of her cheek. She leaned into his touch, her golden eyes fluttering shut, and he realized, there was no turning back. When their lips met, it was not gentle. It was fire, an explosion of everything they had denied themselves. His mind reeled, his body trembled, and for the first time in his disciplined, carefully constructed life, he surrendered completely. Ilana's hands gripped his shoulders, pulling him closer as if she feared he might vanish. The energy between them surged, a fusion of human and Thry, soul and body, logic and passion. He didn't know if it was love, obsession, or something deeper that had no name. All he knew was that he was lost, and he did not want to be found. For in that moment, Nathan realized the truth. Whatever fate awaited them, whatever consequences their union might bring, there was no escape. Ilana was no longer just an alien emissary, no longer just a dangerous temptation. She was his. And he was hers. Bound, unbreakable, inevitable. And the world would burn before they let go. The storm that had threatened to break finally unleashed itself upon the valley that night. Sheets of rain pounded the rooftops, lightning carved jagged paths across the sky, and thunder rolled with the sound of distant artillery. Inside the cabin, the world felt strangely insulated, warm, alive, and fragile. Nathan sat by the fire, his fingers tapping lightly against the arm of the chair, while Ilana paced slowly, her movements more restless than usual. There was a tension in the air, thicker even than the storm outside, as though something invisible pressed down upon them both. Earlier that day, word had arrived from the summit's communication relay. Certain factions of the Thry had lodged formal protests against Ilana's prolonged interaction with Nathan. Rumors had spread that their connection was more than diplomatic, more than cultural exchange. It was dangerous, intimate, and blurring the fragile boundaries between their peoples. Nathan knew what such whispers meant. Human leaders would seize them as leverage, and Thry elders would wield them as accusations. Both sides, equally suspicious, might see their bond as treason. Ilana stopped pacing and turned toward him. Her eyes glimmered faintly in the firelight, reflecting both beauty and sorrow. "They will not let this continue," she said quietly, her voice almost drowned by the storm. "The council fears what they do not understand." "And you?" she trailed off, her lips tightening. Nathan leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "Say it. You think they'll come for me?" Ilana nodded slowly. "Not only you. They will come for us both. The Thry believe once a resonance has been established between two beings, it cannot be undone without consequence. To them I have already crossed into forbidden territory. And to your people," she paused, searching for words, "I am already a weapon they cannot control." The fire crackled, sending sparks upward. Nathan felt the weight of her words, but he also felt something else rising inside him. Anger. Anger that something so profound, so human in its purity, could be twisted into suspicion and danger. He stood, his voice steady but sharp. "Then let them come. I didn't ask for this connection, Ilana, but I won't let anyone take it away. Not them. Not anyone." For a moment, silence filled the room except for the distant roar of the storm. Ilana approached him, her steps slow, deliberate. She stopped close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin, could see the faint patterns glowing faintly across her temple, marks of her species that only flared in moments of deep emotion. "You don't understand what you are saying," she whispered. "If we resist them, it will not be negotiation. It will be war. And between us," her voice faltered, the glow on her skin intensifying. "Between us, it will only deepen. The resonance grows stronger every time we are near. It may bind us beyond choice." Nathan's breath caught. He had known, but hearing her say it aloud made it undeniable. They were standing on the edge of something far greater than themselves, something that might consume them both. He reached for her hand instinctively, and though she hesitated, her fingers finally curled into his. The touch was electric. Not metaphorically but literally, an invisible current hummed through his arm, spread across his chest and lit every nerve with fire. Nathan gasped, and Ilana's eyes widened as if she too felt the surge. The resonance was no longer subtle, no longer hidden beneath layers of restraint. It was alive, expanding between them like a second heartbeat. "Nathan," she whispered, her voice shaking. "If we continue, there will be no going back." He swallowed hard, his mind a chaos of fear and desire, reason and defiance. Outside, the thunder roared as if answering her words. "Maybe there shouldn't be," he said finally, his voice low but unyielding. Ilana closed her eyes as though battling with herself. When she opened them, they burned with intensity, more vibrant than he had ever seen. "Then you must understand what that means. My people will see me as corrupted. Yours will see you as compromised. We will have no place, neither among humans nor among Thri." Nathan squeezed her hand tighter. "Then we'll make our own place." The simplicity of his answer seemed to break through her defenses. For the first time in hours, she smiled faintly, though it carried the sadness of 1,000 unspoken fears. "You speak like someone who has never lost everything," she murmured. "Maybe I haven't," he admitted. "But I know I'd lose myself if I walked away from this." The storm outside intensified as if the world itself was bearing witness to their choice. And then, as if the resonance demanded it, Ilana stepped forward and pressed her forehead gently against his. The glow of her markings spread across her face, mirrored by a heat in his chest that felt almost unbearable. In that instant they were no longer two separate beings, they were joined, bound by something primal and ancient. Nathan felt her thoughts brush against his own, her emotions flooding into him. Fear, longing, strength, sorrow, and above all, love. His knees nearly buckled, but he held on, gasping. "Ilana, what's happening?" Her voice trembled, but she did not pull away. "The bond is sealing. I tried to prevent it. But it seems the choice was never ours to make." The moment stretched into eternity, and when it finally passed, they both pulled back slightly, their breaths ragged, their bodies trembling. Nathan knew something irreversible had taken place. The connection was no longer fragile, it was permanent, undeniable. Ilana's hands shook as she drew them away. "It is done," she said, her voice heavy with both wonder and dread. "From this moment, nothing will be the same." The words lingered in the air, and Nathan felt the truth of them settle deep into his bones. But instead of despair, he felt a strange clarity. Whatever lay ahead, accusations, exile, or war, he would face it as long as she stood beside him. Suddenly, a sharp sound cut through the storm, the distant hum of engines, mechanical and purposeful. Nathan's head snapped toward the window. Beyond the rain, faint lights pierced the darkness. Hovercraft, moving in formation. Ilana stiffened. "They've come sooner than I thought." Nathan grabbed his jacket, his instincts flaring. "Who?" "Both," she replied grimly. "Human security and Thri enforcers. They are here for us." The fire sputtered as if startled by the words. Nathan felt his pulse quicken, his mind racing. The fragile sanctuary of the cabin was no longer safe. They had crossed a threshold that neither side would tolerate. Now, hunted from both directions, their only chance lay in escape. Ilana met his gaze one last time, her expression fierce and unyielding. "Then we run. Together." And with that, they stepped out into the storm, hand in hand, the resonance burning between them like a beacon. When a woman begins to show her interest through subtle slips of the tongue, those words often come wrapped in layers of emotion, hesitation, and sometimes an unconscious desire to be noticed. By the time a man notices these phrases recurring, it is no longer coincidence. It is a carefully disguised truth revealing itself through repetition. In this stage of awareness, when the seventh layer of unintentional confessions emerges, the reality becomes undeniable. Her words are not random, her tone is not casual, and her slips are not mistakes. They are the delicate cracks in her walls, the tiny fractures through which her guarded feelings leak into the open. This seventh phrase usually comes in the form of something dangerously close to possession, a hint that she sees you not as just someone in her world, but as her world. It may not be direct, but it carries the unmistakable energy of someone who has already chosen you, even if she hasn't admitted it to herself. The seventh phrase often takes shape in sentences like, "I don't like when other girls talk to you," or "You're always busy when I want you around," or even more subtle, "You belong here, not out there with them." At first glance, it might sound like teasing, playful annoyance, or even casual banter. But if one listens closely, the undertone is laced with possessiveness. It is the accidental ownership that slips out when emotions grow too strong to stay hidden. This is not the light-hearted joking of a friend, it is the voice of someone who, deep inside, fears losing you before she has even openly declared her claim. The slip is revealing because jealousy rarely belongs to friendship. It blooms only where there is desire, only where attachment has already taken root. A woman who has not begun to feel deeply will not care who else has your attention. But the one who lets such a phrase escape has already been captured by the thought of you. This phrase is not always sharp or confrontational. Sometimes it comes in softer forms like, "You didn't text me back, I thought you forgot me," or, "You had fun without me." That doesn't feel right. These words carry the same core meaning. She is placing herself in the center of your world, demanding a role without consciously realizing she is demanding it. Her emotions lead her tongue, and in the process she exposes the truth she may not be ready to confess in more direct terms. This is why such phrases are both powerful and dangerous. They show that she has reached a stage where silence is no longer enough, where her heart insists on shaping sentences that betray her. And though she may laugh after saying them, try to cover them up with excuses or playful deflections, the truth remains visible. The psychology of this moment is deeply fascinating. Possessiveness is the final, unguarded sign of attachment. When a woman unconsciously reveals it, she is not simply speaking from curiosity or care. She is speaking from instinct, the primal instinct that tells her you are hers, even if she has not yet claimed it openly. These slips do not emerge when she talks to strangers, colleagues, or distant acquaintances. They appear only in front of the one who has ignited something inside her, the one whose absence feels heavier than she is willing to admit, and whose presence feels like a necessity she cannot live without. This is why the seventh phrase is so critical in recognizing her interest. It is the transformation of desire into possession, of attraction into an almost territorial bond. One must also understand the delicacy of this stage. If a man responds with care and attentiveness, he validates her hidden feelings, giving her confidence to lower her guard even further. But if he mocks, dismisses, or ignores these slips, she may retreat back into her silence, masking her interest so deeply that it may never resurface. In that sense, the seventh phrase is both an invitation and a test. It is her way of saying, "I want to know if you notice me enough to see what I am really saying." To miss it is to miss the doorway into her true self, the version of her that longs for connection beyond casual exchanges. In storytelling, these moments are often described as the instant where two characters cross from playful banter into unspoken confession. The reader or observer understands what the characters themselves cannot yet say, that love is already present, that the tension is already alive, and that the walls between them are beginning to crumble. The seventh phrase is the living embodiment of that tension. It is fragile yet undeniable, innocent yet powerful, subtle yet louder than any direct confession. When a woman says it, she is speaking with more honesty than she perhaps ever has, because it is not planned. It is pure instinct, unfiltered truth, an echo of her heart slipping through the cracks of her composure. From this point forward, her behavior changes. Once the seventh phrase is spoken, even accidentally, she cannot fully retreat into the safety of denial. The words linger, haunting both her and the man she has spoken them to. Every interaction afterward carries the weight of that unspoken admission. If she pretends it never happened, he still remembers. If she covers it with laughter, the echo still remains. And if he dares to respond with affection, the boundary shatters completely, transforming her accidental slip into the first step of an inevitable truth. Thus, the seventh phrase is not just an accident, it is the revelation. It is the moment where attraction evolves into attachment, and attachment begins to whisper its claim. A man who hears it must listen not just with his ears but with his understanding, recognizing that within those casual words lies the rawest expression of her desire. The phrase may be short, playful, or even cloaked in annoyance, but its meaning is vast. She does not want to share you, she does not want to lose you, and she does not want to remain invisible in your world. Whether she admits it aloud or not, her heart has already chosen. In the journey of recognizing the hidden signals of love, the seventh phrase stands as both climax and confirmation. It tells the story that her heart has been writing silently all along, and it does so without her consent. That is why it is precious, that is why it is powerful, and that is why it is the clearest proof of what she truly feels. Life has a way of circling back, often in the most unexpected and poetic ways. By the time the final chapter of this strange journey began to unfold, I realized that the story wasn't about rebellion, freedom, or even a clash between homeowners and a self-styled tyrant like Karen. It was about identity, about standing up for who you are, about refusing to be small when someone else insists on towering over you. The storm she had brewed had finally lost its thunder, and what remained was the quiet clarity of aftermath. When the dust from the courtroom battles settled, Karen was stripped of her illusory authority. She had been fined heavily, her reputation in ruins, and every attempt to claw back control ended in another humiliating defeat. The HOA dissolved completely, and the land returned fully into my stewardship, uncontested. Yet, despite all the victories, I did not feel the satisfaction I had once imagined. Winning wasn't a triumphant roar, it was a quiet exhale, a release of tension that had been coiled too long. The town, once divided, began to mend itself. Neighbors who had stayed silent before started coming forward, offering words of regret, solidarity, even gratitude. Many admitted they had been afraid of Karen's wrath, afraid of confrontation, afraid of being isolated if they dared to resist her. Their honesty didn't excuse their silence, but it did help me understand the culture of fear she had cultivated. A single tyrant is powerful, yes, but it is the silence of the crowd that allows tyranny to flourish. That silence had finally broken. For weeks, I poured myself into repairing the property she had damaged. Fences were rebuilt, the garden restored, the lakeside dock reinforced. Yet what surprised me most was how the community rallied together. People brought wood, tools, food, and even their time. Where Karen had divided, defamed, and deceived, something else was taking root now: solidarity. I was reminded that while one person can destroy, many can rebuild. During those quiet evenings by the lake, as the sun painted the water in streaks of crimson and gold, I often thought about my father. Karen's greatest mistake had been treating him as an ordinary old man. She had underestimated the quiet dignity of a soldier who had seen more than she could ever imagine. His lessons guided me even when he wasn't present: strength tempered by patience, power grounded in fairness, and resilience born not from arrogance but from endurance. In her arrogance, Karen believed power was domination. My father, and later this journey, taught me that true power was self-mastery. Yet Karen was not entirely gone. Even stripped of titles, fined into silence, and socially exiled, she lingered like a shadow. Rumors circulated of her attempting to start fresh in another neighborhood, only to be exposed before she could infect it with her schemes. In a way, it seemed almost sad, this woman who could never simply exist without control. She had built her identity on domination, and when stripped of it, she was hollow. The tragedy of Karen was that she had mistaken fear for respect, rules for community, and control for love. But while her story was one of downfall, mine became one of renewal. With the land secure and the community healing, I began to look ahead. The cabin that had once felt like a fortress against her attacks transformed back into what it was meant to be: a sanctuary. Not just for me but for others. I opened its doors to neighbors, friends, and travelers. Where once there had been paranoia, there was now laughter. Where once the lake reflected isolation, now it reflected unity. Looking back, the irony was striking. Karen had stormed in with demands, threats, and false claims of authority, believing she could take what was never hers. She believed she was powerful because of her position, her rules, her fear tactics. But true power never came from a title. It came from resilience, from the willingness to stand firm when pressured, and from knowing when to fight back and when to simply wait for arrogance to collapse under its own weight. The lesson was not just mine, it became a shared story within the town. Parents told their children about the HOA tyrant who tried to take the land, and how neighbors eventually stood together to stop her. It was no longer a story of bitterness, but of warning and wisdom. Communities, they realized, cannot thrive under oppression. They thrive when each voice matters, when no single person believes themselves above all others. And so, the final irony became this: Karen, in her destructive crusade, had accidentally created a stronger, more unified community. In trying to seize control, she reminded us why freedom mattered. In trying to isolate me, she had forced others to rediscover solidarity. In trying to silence dissent, she made our voices louder. Her downfall was our awakening. Years from now, I know the details will blur. The exact fines she paid, the legal battles, the confrontations, all of it will fade into the background of memory. What will remain is the feeling, the defiance of standing tall when someone tried to make me kneel, the relief of watching justice catch up to arrogance, the warmth of seeing neighbors finally stand together. Those feelings are timeless. One evening, sitting by the fire pit with several neighbors, we laughed about the absurdity of it all. Someone joked, we should name the dock after Karen, so we never forget what we survived. The suggestion was met with chuckles, but also a thoughtful silence. Perhaps they were right. Perhaps remembering was as important as moving on. Because in the end, Karen was more than just a person, she was a lesson. A lesson in arrogance, in abuse of authority, and in the resilience required to face both. But more importantly, she was proof that tyranny, no matter how loud or cruel, always collapses when people refuse to bow. And as I watched the stars reflect in the calm waters of the lake, I realized something profound. She had come to take my peace, but in the end, she had strengthened it. She had come to claim what was mine, but she had only helped me appreciate it more deeply. She had tried to silence me, but she had only amplified my voice. In losing, she gave me more than she could ever steal. That was her true legacy, not destruction, not power, not even fear. Her legacy was the lesson she never intended to teach, that no force, no rule, no false authority can ever defeat the quiet, steady power of truth. And with that, the chapter closed, not with anger, not with revenge, but with peace. A peace earned, defended, and now shared. The end.